welcome to our next dialogue on the School of Solidarity. And especially, I'm not going to put this dialogue under any theme because it's not even God conscious organizations or my journey of transformation. But I have a very special guest today, and I'm really honored that Nadeem could take some time out to have an open dialogue and discussion about many things which are very close to my heart and Nadeem's heart as well. So before we start the dialogue, let me just quickly introduce Nadeem. Nadeem Haque is a philosopher of science, and he's an author and practicing civil engineer in Canada. He lives in Canada. Nadeem has written numerous books and articles, papers at the intersection between Islam and science and philosophy, tackling major areas such as evolution, consciousness, extraterrestrial life, which is, I think, more so around the revelation, the Quran, the environment, animals, science and religion, unification, and pre-ancient history of science, physics, and its unification, philosophical science fiction, and futurism and poetry. I mean, wow, a rocking star, I would say. So he's currently the director of the Institute of Higher Reasoning. He is also the grandson of Al-Hafiz B.A. Masri, whose pioneering research is continuing after Masri's demise. Welcome, Nadeem. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you for this opportunity. Wow, amazing portfolio you have here. But let's start from maybe as I was asking you about your roots and how are they manifesting living, especially in a secular society. Secular, when I say, of course, I don't want to use the term non-Muslim or non-Islamic country, but secular. You are in Canada. So while you are carrying your sort of this legacy you're continuing of your ancestors, which is quite rich, can you just briefly touch upon your roots, as in you are from Punjab, before Pakistan, pre-partition?
My ancestors are from Punjab, and there was no Pakistan at that time, and they migrated to East Africa, Uganda, where I was born, and I stayed there till 1972 when Idi Amin came into power, and he was a dictator and was a very dangerous person. My father was a very prominent lawyer, and Idi Amin wanted to make him the Attorney General, but that's being like someone under Hitler, like following his orders, and my father couldn't do that. So we left Uganda. It's a long story. We left and then stayed in England actually for a few years. I went to a grammar school there, and then moved to Canada. But then for my I studied economics, but then for engineering I moved to England for a few years. I lived near London. I studied at King's College London, so I was exposed to a lot of great people like who had a lot of knowledge. Actually, one of them being my grandfather, and then also I was challenged a lot at the university in terms of whether it's why is Islam the truth? I mean, that's what began my journey into questioning things, right? I was challenged basically, and we formed a group there called analysts in the sense that they were the cream of the crop, like really brilliant Muslims, and essentially we used to have meetings every week, and for years, and then we held the major conferences. We helped ISNA, MSA, the embryology lecture at the University of Toronto with Keith Moore, T.V.N. Prasad, Marshall Johnson. These were the top guys in embryology, and 600 people attended, and we publicized it in the media, and this idea got out of Quran and science more, right? Like after Maurice Bouquet, then it was like we did a lot of stuff actually, and then there were other people that we knew, like Gary Miller. He was part of our group. Abdullah Omar, the mathematician, you know, so-called
Mhm.
convert. Yeah, I just continued my studies because I wanted to prove it, the truth of Islam from various angles, and they're all interconnected. I mean, you know, even animal welfare is connected to gravity. You might say that's ridiculous. How can animal welfare be connected to gravity?
Mm.
Well, you see, the thing is that if you understand what space and time is, then you understand what consciousness is. And if you
Mm.
understand what consciousness is, then you understand that that consciousness is the same in animals, and it produces this thing I call affinity. And so really all knowledge is interconnected.
That's,
So-
yeah,
yeah.
totally integrality as well.
Yes, yes. And
And
that's the term I really started to use
yeah,
more when I met you guys.
yes, but tell me, Nadeem, now that we are having a very open and frank
Yeah.
dialogue around this. The thing is that more than us proving to others,
Hmm.
like when I say us, as in the Muslim intellectuals and philosopher like yourself, trying to prove to the world that Islam is the truth, or the true nature of this universe, or nature of humans, like fitra, we say this is the true nature, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think Muslim themselves lack this understanding themselves. And I think this is where we kind of went wrong. Because imagine, I'm not going to keep beating the drum. I'm not one of those who says the golden age of Islam. Yes, but then what? It kind of just vanished, it disappeared. And we say that ilm, which is not knowledge, but ilm was our heritage as in Muslims, and we just lost that. So tell me that in a world, in a very polarized and multiverse kind of universe we live in, or the world we live in, what is the role for you and me as those intellectuals, or I mean the philosophy you are in science? What is our role? How can we, when we talk about unification, it's
Hmm.
basically the universal knowledge, how do we unify? That is the roadblock we have.
You mean how do we unify peoples, right? Is that what you mean when you talk unity,
Yes,
or ideas, or both, maybe?
ideas and knowledge.
Yeah, ideas.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, the word ilm, actually, it is not really like, it's very, it covers everything, you know, because Islam doesn't make a split between, actually, it doesn't make a split between spiritual and non-spiritual. Like, these are words in the English language, but when you read the Quran, you
Mhm.
don't get that, right? Even uh even the word integrality, integral, you don't get that, because the concept is one. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? It's just
Yeah.
that when in this society, then we have to say that to make people understand that everything is actually united, or let's say, for example, the science and religion are united. Of course they're united. I mean, you don't
Yes.
even have a concept of separation if you're really thinking. But you see, we have been brainwashed so much. We have gone on the wrong tracks, because of the dominance of the wrong ideas from Western society, which in part was reacting against this kind of Trinitarian
Mhm.
mysticism and all that, right? That now it's like, it's kind of difficult to make people see that, yeah, these things are all connected, and and I think that the way I approach it is, I don't consider, I have a definition of Muslim, which I think is the Quranic definition of Muslim. It's not, doesn't have to do with the name, because Islam means submission to God, and you could be in submission to God even without knowing the Quran or the Prophet. You could be a Muslim, you know. In the
Mhm.
Quran, it says that some people came to the Prophet, and when he explained Islam, or it was a hadith, I can't remember. He said, yeah, we believed in this even before. I think this is in the Quran. So in other words, um, it's not the Muslim, Muslim, the actual, the name, but it's your
Mhm.
your behavior, your
The
consciousness.
nature.
Because yeah,
When we imply nature, it means nature holistically, as
yeah,
in, the human nature as well,
yeah,
which is part of the ecology as well. Because where do we draw our knowledge from?
yeah. Exactly,
it's all
because the word because nature is in submission to Allah. So
yeah,
nature is a Muslim. Sounds weird. Animals are Muslims. Actually, people didn't say that until we started to talk about it. As animals are Muslim because they're in submission to God. So everything in nature submits to God except the human will, which may not, and the will of other species like us and other planets, and the jinn, and all that, like this class may not follow, but everything else is in submission to the creator. So
yeah.
by studying that, you can come closer to Allah, because then you'll see how things submit, right? So there's
Mm.
no, like, someone
Concept
say,
of Tawheed, you mean?
yes, Tawheed, like, and you may say,
Oneness.
well, that's, let's say you're studying the cell, in a reductionist way, and then like, as I'm in touch with someone who's written a book that the cell is extremely important, because the DNA is just like a toolbox, but it's the cell that does the work. But you got to think more deeply than even that, because what makes the cell, like you see, if you have a toolbox, and using the tools you make the stuff, but you're a conscious agent making a house or something using the tools. But the cell itself is not conscious. So where does the consciousness come? Where does the planning, the organization, the design, where does it really come from? So what I'm saying is that by studying even something reductionistic, you are actually led to, the creator. There's no separation. Someone say, well, that's spiritual. It's not spiritual. It's reality, actually, right?
Mm, mm.
So, so yeah.
But
So
then again, when you say spiritual, we need to replace the word with metaphysics, because the Quranic knowledge, without delving deeper into the metaphysics of the socio-scientific
yeah,
methodology, it needs that. Otherwise, the common person will not have the understanding of Quran like those of you philosophers or scientists have, or maybe I see it from a very metaphysical lens. It speaks to me in that way. So we need to maybe have that, we have to delve deeper into that metaphysical realm as well, right? Do you agree with
okay.
that?
So, I mean, how would you define metaphysics then? How would you define that?
Because it's the spiritual, what we say, there is that the hidden aspect which has to be contemplated, right?
Yeah,
Not just the legalistic, how it has been taught to us or how it's been preached to us, right?
yeah,
So that then, considering the human experience, the vast experience,
yeah.
then the Quran would speak to all of us in its own way, right?
Yeah, and that's what so we're coming back to that point where knowledge is one. You see, the thing is that because they're not used to talking about God, or they don't complete their thought and say, well, this thing couldn't have happened by chance, it needs an intelligence. When we start talking about it, we say, oh, we have to bring in the metaphysical component. But from the Quranic point of view, even these terminologies are not there, right? It's very interesting, right? The Quran is so, as you say, integral, that it doesn't even use the word integral. Like the whole.
Mm.
So this is what how
Yeah, but it
knowledge.
does ask people to contemplate and
Yes,
do tafakkar and tadabbur and
yes, exactly,
kind of
exactly.
needs that. Yeah, okay.
But yeah.
Um, your work is, it just reminds me of the work of Masood Alam Chaudhry. Are you familiar with
Oh
his
no,
work?
no.
No, he is also in Canada. You see, I think this is the thing,
Yeah,
the disconnect. And Ronnie and I were having a dialogue just yesterday,
yeah,
and we were talking about the kind of work you are doing, or the
hmm.
kind of work Masood Alam Chaudhry is doing, or the kind of work I do. I'm on a very lower scale compared to
Oh,
yours,
no,
but
we're all.
I think it all came from God, actually, that I understood the concept of Islamic, um, not finance, but economics, or the concept of, say, for example, muakhat, why the Prophet ﷺ
Hmm.
propagated that, share with your brothers what you have in abundance or excess. I mean,
Yeah,
it's simple. That's the philosophy, right?
yeah,
But then the principle was give Qarda Hasan, interest-free loan. Not interest-free, it's a benevolent loan. I
yeah,
mean, how can I give you from the money I have? It actually, there has to be a philosophy or the epistemological, understanding. But that is, you would see, is missing from, say, for example, Islamic finance, totally missing. And Masood Al-Alam Chaudhry has also, just like you, he's developed this methodology or framework scientifically. And he actually has written a book. In that, he also talks about entropy, from physics perspective and sustainability and entropy. But then he brings the concept of, how we understand barakah or grace. I mean, it's such an amazing concept, but these kind of concepts are not propagated. Like, they don't come like mainstream like your work. I mean, you've done amazing work. You're challenging now Newton as well. So
it's more like Einstein or
Einstein, sorry. Yes, Einstein. So I actually, inspired by his work, I started these dialogue series on God conscious organizations, because that was also inspired by Masood Al-Hasan Chaudhry's work. I have the book here, I can share with you. So I think these very distinctive concept, which I won't call them new. These are not new concept, but it's about, developing further the work of, I mean, when I look at your work, I was reading Microbits, and it just reminded me of Ibn al-Arabi and how he's defined quantum as well. So you're kind of further developing this work.
And I mean, the truth of it is, and I can talk it because you're a Muslim and there's some Muslims listening, and others may not be very, they might think it's a bit strange, but in reality, physics cannot be understood from a causational point of view without bringing in God. Now, when I wrote From Microbits to Everything in 2001 with Muhammad Muslim, my colleague who's in West Africa, we did not mention God at all. And the reason we didn't is because if you start giving it to scientists, they say, oh, this is all this God crap, right? Okay. And then when I updated it, I just hinted it like in 2021. But in reality, you cannot, as a terminus point, explain the existence of material, so-called material, without the existence of a creator who's sustaining the material, which means that that is part of physics, you could say. Did you see that? And I think, so what is happening now is that these many people are now considering that there's a single particle out of which everything arose. But the thing is, we already have written about it in 2001, but now they are considering it. I won't go into who it is and all that. So, I mean, one of them actually is the student of Heisenberg. He's still alive. He's 94 years old. He said something similar to what I said. So I'll get his book in a few days' time. And so there's a kind of, these ideas are going to, inshallah, spread. But
because it was Masood Al-Alam Chaudhry who said that science bereft of sound epistemological foundation is muddle-headed. So like what you are saying. But then again, the thing is that I see it's not a rant. I'm just saying that I see that Muslims try to prove it in a very self-righteous manner and in a very contrasting nature, which I feel like that's why maybe we are not too mainstream as well. So how do we tackle that issue?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is just to lay out the facts, and so the thing is that this about equilibrium, like it's gotten onto the Yale University website now, like just kind of unbelievable that it's got onto that level, because I'm just laying out the facts, and I'm not saying my religion is better than yours, or like I'm just laying out the facts. In fact, I'm trying to unite people. I'm trying to say that what Jesus said, what Moses said, what all these, they said the same thing, and this is what it's supposed to be. And this is going to lead to a better world, instead of all these stupid wars that are happening, and people grabbing land and killing people, and destroying animals, forests. Like from an ecological point of view, we're in a disastrous situation as well, right? Once you realize, and that's why I introduce these kind of concepts like Equi-cognitions, those 4 Equi-cognitions. If you have them and you follow them, then they're like Newton's laws, right? Because If you don't have even one of them, then you're not going to have an optimum society. So in order to optimize society, you have to have the four recognitions, which will then lead to sustainability, because they make you think of the balance, which you'll maintain. And and this concept of affinity, like closeness, right? Because if all animals share consciousness, even a worm, then you are actually close to them. And, and like I thought, okay, maybe this is very theoretical, but it actually happened to me. Then, you know, I went to pick up my son at York University. His last day, he was leaving, you know, and I brought a truck, right? So we were moving the furniture. When he went to throw the garbage, he saw this animal, like it's like a rodent, but it was almost dead, but it wasn't dead. And so I really felt sorry for it, because it said, yeah, this animal is conscious like me, and it has a role in nature. So it brought in all those elements of cognitions, and I made an effort, and I called the Humane Society, and they came and they took it away. It hadn't died, so maybe its life was saved. So I said, okay, maybe this Allah is giving me a practical example of the ideas I've been talking about, right? That it's not, it's also psychological, you see. So he's got, and then the economics part also comes in, right? Where I was talking about the idea of Mizan.
Equi-nomics.
The idea of Mizan is very, because let's say a banking system where you don't have actually banks, but it's like a totally different system, which is the way it should be actually. But if you don't have this idea of maintaining the balance, then it's one of the ignition, then it's going to falter, right? So what I'm saying is that, like, this is one of the main things that has to be brought back into economics, a way to measure it. Because in my area, for example, I've worked in maintenance management, facilities management. Measurement is very important, because measurement makes you think, like act, right? Like if you, even when we do, let's say in engineering, you go to a building and you do a condition based assessment, like you assess the building according to what condition it's in, then you have to give it a rating, right? So if you give it a 6, 7, so it makes you think about what should be done. So similarly, like if you come up with some kind of parameters for the balance, which is what I was trying to say, then these could be, make people more sensitive. It could be part of the economic model. So that's what I was trying to say.
Look, Ronnie and I were having is in relation to what you and I are discussing, that these ideas or these concepts have to be institutionalized as well, because without doing that, I mean, you will write 10 more books, maybe. I've stopped writing books because I thought, who is it serving? Just the academics again? And unless we build those institutions, and unless we have that patronage as well, because look, you and I have to pay our bills as well. You know, you work as an engineer, but you still keep on doing your research on the side. But that is one element which I feel is missing, especially in the Muslim world, that we don't get that patronage where it used to be before. We would, you know, you would be supported, and you know, you just leave everything else and you further your research, and you get that support around you, and then also institutionalized. But we don't go there. So
no, but I mean, during the time of, I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Al-Biruni and all these people, but Biruni, for example, he was supported by the sultans, various sultans, right? And he was able to do amazing work. Actually, I read a book.
Even in Batul Hikmah, why was Batul Hikmah created? House of Wisdom. That's why it was created, to support all these intellectuals, philosophers, and their work. But I'm not saying it's not. I know Saudis are doing it, Qataris are also doing it. But still, I think we lack this communities you and I are in. We don't get that kind of patronage.
No, we don't. And I mean, it's a very political thing, because a lot of the stuff that I said, for example, when I wrote the book From Facts to Values, you don't have that, and it's not online. But
you sent me a paper, I think.
It's, you know, actually, there's a chapter from that, actually. So for example, the Muslim community, like, you know, they're not like, they even were banning it, you know, for example, at Muslim Awareness Week and all that, because it's a kind of book, you know, that was very critical of the way the Muslims were doing things. And also some of these organizations, I'm not going to name it, but I know for a fact, are funded by governments in the Middle East. And if you speak out, like in terms of how it should be, then it becomes a problematic, right? So so you can't you even have to be careful, you know, about
You word
30 years
that.
ago when I went to Pakistan, 30 years ago, because my relatives, they have connection with the media. They said, "Oh, you've written from facts to values. Why don't you be interviewed? But you can't say X, you can't say Y, you can't say Z, you know,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
going to go against the government, you know, the way that they look at things, right? So,
Yes. 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 I
um,
mean, let's briefly touch upon, what you've been writing about, animals in Islam. Do
yeah,
you think,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that um, animals have rights, right? But that is the aspect missing, especially, I think, in Muslim societies.
Yes.
Because if you look at other societies, they care for animals. We don't do that. So we've lost that, which was the mirage given to us, right?
Yeah.
So where is your work landing on, say, the rights of animals in Islam? Who's
Well,
picking
the work of my grandfather, which I continued, has what it's
Yes.
done. It's kind of basically shown internationally that Islam says so much about animals, you know,
Mm,
more than any other belief system actually. So, like, so now if you go on the internet, you'll see like a lot of stuff about animals. But it was started with my grandfather, right? He wrote the book Animals in Islam, Islamic Concern for Animals, because Compassion in World Farming approached him and said, listen, in the Muslim world, they're treating animals so badly. Like, why don't you
yes.
write something? That's what
Yes.
happened. That's how it began. And so he
Yeah.
wrote Islamic Concern for Animals, which became the first chapter of a bigger book called Animals in Islam. And then that apparently spread to even universities like Harvard. And then they found out about me because I'd written this paper about ecognitions using my
Mm,
grandfather's work and my work. And I went there,
mm.
they said, oh, your Masri's grandson, you know, like his work is really revered, and why don't we write update it with essays from these scholars, all of them non-Muslim, except one, right? So that took a couple of years, and then we republished the Animals in Islam with these essays. So the message has spread, like even like people like Peter Singer, you know, he gave a blurb. He has a copy of it, like, you know, all this information has now spread, and then you know, my take on this whole recognition thing as a kind of a law for mankind, like Newton's three laws, you know, because the way it is set up right now is it doesn't matter where in the galaxy you are, what planet you are, when it is, if you don't have these four in your system, then you can't have like you can't approach optimality, you know. So
So we can touch upon those as well. But I have a question
yeah,
regarding, animals in Islam.
yeah, yeah.
So tell me, is it true that having a dog in your house, it's haram? You can't have a dog in your house?
You know, there's nothing like that in the Quran itself. So there are hadith, you know, which
Yes.
we talk about that. But then again, you have to take hadith with a pinch of salt, and you have to see, you know, because hadith came much later after the
Mhm.
Quran, right? About 150, 200 years after. So the idea basically, you know, you have to look at the concept, you know, which is, you know, hygiene. And I think that so long as there's hygiene, you know, it's okay. Like, so a lot of Muslims say you can't use, you know, for example, have pictures in your house or painting, but they don't realize, even from the hadith, that when the Prophet said that, there was a context. People used to worship those things, right? So you're not
Mm,
supposed to have things which you worship. So the whole thing about so-called extremists or whatever you want to call them, they're not taking things into context, right? So
mm,
when you're a
mm.
blind person, these dogs, guide dogs, are so good, right? They will help you. Does it mean you can't have a guide dog in your house? It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's nonsense. Like, a lot of the stuff is just nonsense. What you're supposed to do is, you're supposed to follow certain principles, right? And these principles are from the Quran. And then you're supposed to
Yes.
put them into your, you know, the situation, right? So
Mm.
that's my view on it. And
Briefly explain for my channel this dialogue about the ecognition, especially the formula for equilibrium, which is balance, or coming from Al-Mizan. The
yeah,
eco.
Yeah.
cognitions.
So I'll explain background for what happened. So what happened was that my friend Mehran Banai, he was at York University many years ago, and the professor at the university, David John Livingston, he was one of the producers of The Nature of Things with David Suzuki. He's a very famous person. He passed away. He said that there are no such thing as absolute rights. They're all man-made and synthetic. But we as Muslims know that there are absolute rights. So I said, Mehran said, like, how can we prove this? I said, okay, let me think about it. And then I came up with an idea. And then then Mehran wrote about it. And which was that, for example, in Australia, there was someone, a movie star, who made a coat made of snakeskin. So they killed all the snakes. When they killed all the snakes, the rat population went up. The rats ate the crops, and there was starvation in that part of Australia. So it said that it is the inherent right of the snake not to be killed so that we can uphold the balance. Because once you start killing the snake, then you have a negative cascading effect, right? So I said, well, let's give this a name. So I gave it the name equigenic. Genic is origin, equi is equal, balance. I said that a lot of these academics, they come up with names, and why don't we do it? Maybe it'll catch on. And it did catch on later on, right? So I called it the equigenic principle, that these rights are not man-made. When you look at the connections into nature, they will project onto your mind by you looking at nature, if you look upon nature honestly, and then you have to maintain it, right? So I called it the equigenic principle. But of course, that's tied to Al-Mizan, right? Because Mizan means balance, right? And incidentally, the main verse of Mizan is in chapter 57, which is exactly halfway through the Quran, because Quran is 114, which is another interesting mathematical thing. Quran has a lot of mathematical stuff, right? Too. So, then when this whole recognition stuff, when I was thinking about this, I said, yeah, actually, I can find I found these four principles. The first one, recognition one, is that everything is a trust from God, which, stewardship, all that, which other belief systems are talk about, right? Which is good. And then the second one is the equigenic principle, to maintain the balance, right? The third one is, in the Quran, says that all animals are in communities like your community, right? And the fourth one is personhood, that every animal, every ant, every one, like, has a right and has its own individual personality. We may see two ants and think that they're the same, but they're not. They have different personalities. Even the way they may communicate in their language may be different. And then what happened after that is, of course, I expanded that, because it's not just human communities. It's not animal communities, it's human communities, which are supposed to be part of the other communities as a supra community, right? So basically I said that now. So what is happening is that the other thing that you see, this is how knowledge is interconnected. When I kind of have proved with my friend consciousness, what consciousness is, where it comes from, and all that, right? The hard problem, it's been, as far as I'm concerned, it's been cracked. It's done. But what it shows is that every species accesses the consciousness of God based on its structure, and therefore we are all connected in that sense. And it's like, I call it affinity, right? Because if you're traveling in let's say Mongolia, and you meet a Pakistani or somebody, and you say, well, you have something in common, right? You feel close to them, right? Now, if we all realize that all species, they're just accessing the same consciousness, right? And it means that it produces affinity. And the other thing that I have proven, you see, it's coming out in another book, and like I've expanded it, the present book. It has to do with evolution, that macroevolution has indeed occurred, but it's a directed evolution. And if it has occurred, then what does that mean? It means that all species, everything, we came from a common source. And that also produces affinity. Now, if it produces affinity, then it produces empathy, right? And if it has empathy, then compassion, and justice, right? Because if you have compassion,
concept of ihsan.
like this whole economic stuff you're doing, you feel compassion, right? You want to help people, right? And your concepts about sharing, and why would you share, like
Ihsan, the concept of ihsan.
Yeah. So all these things are kind of all these things are kind of related, right?
Yeah. So what you are calling affinity, Masood Alam Chaudhry calls it the relational unity of knowledge. I mean, the thing is, we are all saying the same thing in different formulae, or different maybe language, or we speak. The reason I adopted the integral language was, because I thought, okay, this is a language which might just translate my overly Sufistic or metaphysical, mystical
Yeah, yeah.
experiences into, translate it into a very practical way. But look, he is also, you should explore his work,
I
because
will.
he's written a lot about what you're saying, exactly the same way. And he calls it the Tawhidic worldview. And
Yeah,
he's also saying that relationality between the unity of knowledge, what you're calling affinity as
yeah,
well.
for sure.
Yeah,
For sure. And really all the prophets, they came to speak about the same thing, and they were saying the same thing.
that's it. Yeah,
But
yeah.
but it's just that we're using modern terminology, and there are certain bigger issues. Back then you didn't have like pollution issues like you have
Yes.
now,
Yeah.
but our belief system, it kind of is able to solve all of that, right? So basically,
Yeah. So this is what also I'm referring to him a lot, Masoodul Alam Chaudhry, because I like the way he calls it the evolutionary framework. Because yes, we are not evolving the religion itself, but of course, with the evolution of the contemporary new challenges, we are sort of
yeah, exactly.
evolving the evolution of human consciousness.
Yeah, so what it is that the principles are the same, but the details change, right? So it's like you have a
The
tree with
context
very
changes.
strong roots, but it's flexible. Now, if there's a wind and it's rigid, what's going to happen? It's going to break, right? But it
Mm,
needs a strong root. So the roots are the principles, and the rest is, can sway.
yes.
You need that, right? And the other
Yeah.
thing is that you have to be open-ended, because
Mm.
and also like realize that you could be wrong in something so that you can
Yeah.
evolve and
Knowledge
develop.
is not definitive, right?
Yeah.
It's ever flowing. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and you can start to refine like this physics stuff, which I started 20 years ago. Like I'm not trying to like dogmatically stick to the way I've expanded on it and over the years is because I'm trying to refute it. I'm trying to refute my own work. Whereas other people might want to kind of leave out some evidence if it attacks what they're saying, right? But for a
Mm.
truthful person, you have to be humble, right? Because
Yeah.
if you're humble, then you'll grow. You're open to criticism, and
Yeah.
you will ask people, did I explain it?
Because I think also as Muslims,
Yeah,
having very strong faith in revelation, we do believe in intuition as well, because
yeah,
the intuitive knowledge which we can translate, all these ideas are coming from somewhere. So we have to be open to that channel as well.
yes, and sometimes you may know. I'm sure it's happened to you in your life, and it's happened to me, where you somehow know something. Let's say
That's
it's
the
about some
intuition.
human behavior or
Yeah.
something, but you don't know how you know it, and later on it turns out to be true. So how did that, happen, right?
So that's where Ibn al-Arabi's work comes in,
Mm.
because he said, according to Ibn al-Arabi, that everything, all the knowledge is in the mind of God. Not as in, God is not a figure, human
Yeah,
figure, but
yeah.
of course, he also says that there's a cosmological uh, Allah, and also the individuation of Allah in us. So, it's everything is in God's mind, the
Yeah,
knowledge
all
that
we're
comes
doing is we're accessing, accessing the consciousness, which is part of that space which I talk about, and which
from
got me into hot water. But it's the reality, and it's gonna more and more people. No, I got into hot water in the sense that a lot of people went against me, and they said that I'm worshiping space. I said, I'm not worshiping space. Space is is the arena of God's mind, like it's the consciousness, and it's a long topic. We won't get in. So
Yeah.
that's
But
what it
look, Nadeem, all these philosophers were also cancelled in their own time, to be very
is.
honest.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, Ibn al-Arabi got into deep trouble as well.
Yeah.
All these philosophers, because I think they can go somewhere where people are not. Their consciousness is not evolved.
Yeah.
So, of course, the prophets were refuted as well, you see?
Yeah.
So, who are we? I think we should just have this consolation that, okay, never mind, it happens.
Yeah.
My job is just to be that vehicle, through me, that channel. If it's transpiring into
Yeah.
something, it's also Allah's will, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is that we just have to be honest in our lives and truthful, and that'll reflect in our works, and Allah will guide us more, right? and not do it for fame or this or that. Like,
No.
if there's fame, like that would happen. That would be good if the message for spreading the message, but that's it. You know, it's not for
Yeah,
your
of course.
own
I would
ego.
like
It's
your
not for your
message
own
to
ego or
spread.
something. You know?
Yes, no, of
Yeah.
course not.
Yeah.
Yes. But thank you so much. I think we should just end it here today. Otherwise, it's going to be a long video and people get bored and they lose attention.
Okay, so really
But maybe
nice.
we'll have another session with you on microbits as well, which is
Okay,
very
well,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
so much for being here.
Thank you
Have a
very
good
much.
day.
Okay,
Okay,
Assalamu
see you
alaikum.
again. Bye.